So let's skip ahead and continue from the completed strand layout. Let's display the fibers to see how the groom is looking. For that, we go to the graph editor and select the Yeti node. And to see the results of the groom, let's make the comb node the root. So let's turn off the proxy hair and disable X-ray. So we can see that the fibers are following the shape of the strands, but they don't seem to be long enough. So what we will do next is connect the groom node into the grow node. And what this does is make the length of the fibers match the length of the strand nearest to its base. And it's looking pretty good. It's following the proxy geo shape pretty well. We do have some stragglers over here, which we can fix by adding a strand or two to get these fibers to fall in line. We have a few others here as well, but overall it's pretty good. So we'll get back to these later. Right now, what I would like to address is the fibers along the part. So what we want to do is create a couple of custom attributes in the groom node. Using the paint attribute tools allows us to paint floating point values on each strand on a per attribute basis. To get started, we select the groom node. In the attribute editor, go to the attribute paint palette and click add. Let's call the attribute part right, and then part left. For part right, we'll paint strands going this way, part left going the other way. Let's hide the Yeti node for now. In attribute paint, enable display. This will display the strand's attribute value in grayscale, black being a value of 0 and white a value of 1. So let's activate the groom tools under attribute paint tools. Select the paint tool, set the value to 0, and click flood fill. So what this did is paint a value of 0 on all strands for the part right attribute. Next, let's select part left and do the same. So now we've essentially reset each attribute. Now let's go back to the part right attribute and paint a value of 1 on the strands that are on the right side of the part. Paint attributes is used to control attribute values per strand, which can be applied in any number of ways, like controlling the length, or in this case, customizing a part line. Let's make these 0. Okay. Let's make sure that they're fully filled in. Now let's go to the part left attribute and paint a value of 1 on the strands that are on the left side. And that should do it. So now let's turn the hair back on and nothing happened. I have a sneaking suspicion that the attribute naming may be the issue. So let's try renaming the attributes and remove any uppercase characters. And something happened. This means that attribute naming must always be lowercase. Let's correct part left attribute as well. Oh, I did it again. And here we go. Now we have essentially separated the groom into 2 separate groups of strands. The name you give the attribute is arbitrary as long as it is all lowercase, with the option of creating any number of attributes per groom node strands. What ended up happening here is that some strands were left with a paint value of 0. This essentially renders the strand moot, removing any influence on the fibers as if the strand weren't even there. So let's go back and update the paint values. Let's go to part right and paint the strands on the right side of the part. That looks about right. Now let's update the part left. Let's paint the remaining strands on this side. Now let's unhide the Yeti node and success. All hair is back. We have successfully separated the fibers down the part line. Now it looks like we could use a few more strands here where the gap between strands is larger. Basically, we need to define the part line a little more. Similar thing over here where we need to close up the gap. So let's go ahead and add a few more strands. Select the groom node, activate the groom tools, and seeing how the strands are conforming, we may want to place them where they conform a little bit better and then move them into place. What I'm trying to avoid is having to reshape them too much. So shape is decent, it just needs a minor adjustment, and there we go. Let's do the same for this area right here. Place the strand where the conform saves us a little bit of sculpting and move it into place. Let's adjust the strand's direction. Sculpt it a bit, and that works. We have to add a few more, so let's just fast forward. Okay, so now we have to update the attributes with the new strands. So let's double click part right, go to the tool settings, and update the new strands. We need to make sure to paint either a 0 or a 1 on all new strands to get a clean part. Like painting skin weights, any number of joints can pull a single vertice by painting the amount of influence each joint has on the vertice. In this case, the strands are the joints and the fibers are the vertices. Okay, I think that should do it. So let's go back to the groom and see how we did. Much better. We could continue to refine it, but this should work more than well. Now that we've taken care of the part, let's go over clumping.